Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Integrate, a wellbeing platform designed to help you reconnect with yourself and live a life of balance and fulfillment. With personalised assessments, science-backed tools, coaching and community support, Integrate empowers you to build resilience, reduce stress and thrive both personally and professionally. Visit www.integrate.net to claim your free 14-day trial and start your journey to balance today. And now, let's dive into this inspiring conversation. This week on Great Conversations, I have the absolute pleasure of speaking to Peta Stewart. Peta is a conveyancing expert, an author, and a business mentor. Peta, welcome to Great Conversations.
Thank you, and hello from the other side of the world in Australia.
I know, you're definitely a lot warmer than I am in the UK.
Yes, I saw you with your jumper and I've got the short sleeves on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. And I am extremely excited to start because your question from our previous guest is absolutely phenomenal. So, what have you sacrificed to achieve your success?
Well, early on in business, I have owned my own business now for over 15 years and I'm 45 now. So when I opened my business, I was 29, 30. And at that point in time, I had to make the really conscious decision to not have children. And I had to really decide, am I going to have children or am I going to open a business? Now, could I have done both at the same time? Yes. Would I have had the same success and the same trajectory that I have now? I don't think so. It really would have put a back burner on the success that I wanted, the hours that I wanted to work, how I wanted to throw myself into it. And so as females, it does take a lot of our energy, and I wanted to put that energy into the business. So I did actually sacrifice having children to reach the success that I wanted to have.
Mm. And I really, first of all, appreciate you sharing that. And also, I really respect what you're saying about consciously deciding whether or not you wanted to have children, because I find that oftentimes it's in the world that we live in and the speed at which we go, people just it's a tick the box exercise. You get married, you have kids, and actually taking that moment to sit down and really work through, is this something that I want for my life? Is, you know, invaluable exercise to do, and it really resonates because I did something similar. And it wasn't, I was older than you when I got married and was like, right, I want children. And then I just thought, do I want children? Like, actually, is this what I want for my life? And so I love what you're saying. And for me, it was really sort of reestablishing my values and the vision for my life. And I came to a similar decision to you, was that I didn't want children. And it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to build this big business. It was more just the vision and the idea that I had for my life. I didn't want that full-time responsibility. Sometimes it can be quite unnerving, can't it, to put your hand up and be like, no, I consciously chose not to have children. It doesn't make me any less a woman. And it doesn't mean I hate kids.
No, I absolutely adore kids, which is probably even more why my decision was made. I was actually a foster child until I was 10, and then I was adopted when I was 10. So in my early years, I was around a lot of children in foster care that had parents that didn't have time for them. And so I didn't want to be a parent that didn't have enough time to pour into that job, because being a parent should probably be the most important. Well, it shouldn't probably, it should be the most important job. And I wasn't certain that I could give it that energy and give that the respect that it needed. And it wasn't about not having kids, but seeing what I had seen, I didn't want to half-ass it. I didn't want to half-ass being a parent and bring a child into the world if I didn't have the ability to give it all the energy as well. So I am very lucky now, though, because my husband now, we've been married for a few years, he has 2 children. So I have 2 stepchildren. So I still get the part-time maternal bits, and they're older. So I feel lucky that I still managed to get the maternal part instinct and have that in my life. But at the time, I still stand by that it was the correct decision. But of course, that is a very large sacrifice, especially for women with our time body clocks clicking away. It's not like we can just come back to it at any stage.
Yeah. And I'm just interested, for those that are maybe sort of in a position where they're thinking, do I want children? Do I not? Like, what was your, if you can think back, what was your process or how did you go through, you know, being able to answer that question for yourself?
Yeah, for me, it was a lot about energy. When I make decisions, it's all about energy management rather than time management. And the amount of energy that it would take to run the business as it would need and get it off the ground, does that leave enough energy left to be a good parent? And I didn't believe that it did. Or would I be a really good parent and do a lousy job at running a business? And so for me, it was like there is only so much energy in my existence that I can give, and it would be too spread between the two. And I don't think I could do a good job at both of them.
I really, really, really respect that. And I think it comes back to conscious choice. And as I said earlier, I think it's so, I would encourage anyone to, even if you think you want children, to just take a minute and do that reflection and be really clear around why. Like, what's the motivator and the driver behind your decision? And then, as you say, like taking the time to map out what it actually tangibly, feasibly will look like. And I think it speaks to, there's trade-offs for everything, isn't there, in life? Nothing, there's no such thing as a free lunch, as we say, but it's being mindful of exactly I love what you're saying about energy and linking it to the amount of energy that you have, like just picking up on this concept of energy. Given where you are now, like how do you, or how have you over your successful career managed your energy?
Yeah, there was a point in my career, and there's a chapter in this about the book, which I think is actually one of the most important chapters. And one of the sayings that I love to say is that energy is my currency. And it really is. That's what people will book me for. That's what they pay me for. That's what I've learned. And that's actually what my staff will follow. And some people might call it a vibe. You walk into a room and that's got to be someone's energy. Or maybe you go to a supermarket and the checkout chick is just horrible and doesn't want to be there. You're like, you can feel all of those things. For me, I actually learned some years ago, hold on, it really is my energy that people are buying or investing in or following, and buying into, both emotionally and financially. And so I thought, if that is my biggest currency and that's what makes me me, that's what I need to protect and leverage the most. And one thing I love to ask people is, if you had all the time in the world but little energy, would you be more productive or less productive than if you had all the energy but very little time? And most people, everyone I ask, they say, huge energy but little time, you'll be more productive. And so then I say, well, why are you focusing on time management in your life rather than energy management?
What a question.
If
What a
energy is
fabulous
what makes
question.
you more productive and more influential and more fulfilling and more meaningful, why are you focusing on time management instead of energy management? And look, there's times in our life where we can't choose. Like, you have to have some time management. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a hippie that just runs around with no schedule. I live my life to a schedule. But most time management is when you are intersecting with other people. So it's, you've got to, mums might have to do the school drop off, or you've got a meeting, or you've got all of those things. That's an intersection with something else. But everything else in between is about managing energy.
I love this, introducing this concept of energy, because I think that by not managing your energy consciously, it does lead to it leads to, I think, yeah, making unconscious choices that put you in situations that don't benefit you, that put you in jobs, that put you in relationships that takes more than it gives. And that's what the risk is, isn't it? And you touched on meditation, but in order, I think, to get to the point where you're advocating, there is a huge level of self-awareness where you have to know yourself and know what it is that you actually do need. And so what's been your journey of self-awareness to get to the point where you can consciously manage your energy in the way that you're talking to?
past life, Peter, which was what it feels like, was a Australian national age group champion in track cycling. And that was before I opened my own business. I retired kind of the same time, retired from cycling, opened the business. That Peter knew energy management only as physical energy management. I'm either racing and training, or I'm resting and I'm not walking around and I'm saving my legs and I'm eating my food, and didn't know any other difference. And that version of myself, I didn't know until I opened my business, had severe anxiety. I never reached the potential that I had the ability to. In fact, one of my coaches said to me, "You are the biggest underperformer I've ever known." And it was yes. And it was because I would do these things in training that I could not replicate on race day. And it soon became aware to me afterwards, it was because I didn't have the emotional intelligence to understand myself and to understand the anxiety that I was living with, and understanding that that actually was anxiety and that self-awareness. I was so driven by winning that I was so focused that I had no vision around anything else. And I often have said in years after that, that if I had the emotional intelligence that I have now, I would have been a better cyclist, because I didn't have the ability to have tough conversations, handle pressure, be able to perform, be able to compartmentalize, be able to have that awareness. For me, it was physical awareness only. And so I kind of really learnt that the hard way. And then when I opened up my business, of course, I brought in all this high performance sports kind of methodology to running a business. And it doesn't work like that. Don't get me wrong, it really works like that, but you have to have some more balance. Yeah. And so there's a lot of the recipe that works, but it was only then that I was like, oh, hold on. There's actually more to running a business than just being really good at what you do.
Oh,
And
yes.
that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Hold on. I can't just be really good to means like I actually need to be HR and marketing and bookkeeper. And the biggest journey to finding this self-awareness and leaning into energy was really when I started to understand the most important part of a business is being a leader. And I started to delve into and learn about leadership and what that meant, and building that muscle and those skills. And that was when a lot of the self-discovery started coming, and understanding the impact that I have on everyone around me and how important that is. And it all came from that. It all came from having really probably no self-awareness, and just being so focused on winning under any circumstance, to going, hold on, this isn't sustainable. And if I want people to follow me, then I need to be leading in a way that is with empathy and with vision, and all of those things that people will follow you into the trenches with,
Yeah,
which is far
absolutely.
different from being a solo cyclist with one person and no team.
Yeah. And it just, I mean, I'm loving what you're saying about this evolution of leadership for you. And I think it's sort of, a macro level as well. We have this concept of what a leader might look like, and the fact that you're bringing in empathy and vision, and, being conscious of how do you motivate people to follow you. It does come down to energy and emotion, isn't it? You can have two different people saying exactly the same thing, but if it's the energy with which they're inspiring people, they're bringing in authenticity in your leadership, um, is actually what's vitally important. I agree with you, to be a successful leader.
Definitely. And it has to be, when I opened my business, I'd come from stiff, cold, dark corporate lawyers' offices where your vision or values was on a plaque in a wall, in an old room with encyclopedias on the wall. That if you ask most people that work there, they didn't even know what it said. It has to be something that you live, breathe, but most of all, that you actually carry out yourself. You have to be behaving that way. And that's really important. You have to be the leader that behaves in certain ways if you expect other people to be doing the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think back to like, if um when you were younger, when you were growing up, you obviously you said you mentioned briefly that you were in foster care until you were 10. Like, just talk to me about your mindset then and how you were leading yourself and your life.
I think that my extremely competitive nature came from being a foster kid. You didn't know when your next meal was going to come. You didn't know when I would literally sit down at a dinner table and eat as fast as I possibly could so that I could get seconds. That's not a normal kid's life choice every day. If you were in a foster home and you knew there's leftover in the fridge, it wouldn't be unusual for me to wake up in the middle of the night and steal food just because, you know. So I think in a world where you weren't special, being really good at something created you to stand out from the crowd a little bit. And so I was very competitive, both intellectually and with all sports when I was young. And I think that's where that competitive nature came. I wouldn't say I had fantastic leadership skills when I was young, but I would say I had a huge amount of empathy. I always have. And I think that's because I've seen children very disadvantaged from a very young age, that I have a lot of empathy and diversity, which has really served me well growing older. I think the leadership piece really only came in after a few years in business. And I kind of actually really remember the quote that hit home for me that started it all. And it was a Richard Branson quote. And it said, um, look up, in short, look after your team and they'll look after your business. And I did that. I changed my focus from looking after my clients to looking after my team. And they're my number one now instead of I'm talking about conveyancing, not business clients, but in my conveyancing business, the team became my number one focus instead of clients. And it is true. They then will look after your business.
How did you make that shift? Because it sounds to me like it's a real step into vulnerability. Because if you've lived your life up until then, looking after you and yourself, and you're the priority, to then trusting other people and to switching the focus from it's about me and me standing out and sort of driving that success individually, to then getting to this point where it's like I'm going to change, I'm going to trust these people around me and switch that. And so my energy is, yeah, building, I guess the only word I can think of is family, and the real vulnerability that comes with that. Was that a conscious understanding? And then if so, how did you navigate that switch of trusting people and changing?
I never came until I have my own business in the businesses that I worked for, so law firms, because I had worked in law since I finished school and I did all of my study while I worked full time and I studied part time by correspondence. And all of those businesses that I worked in didn't have a leadership model, were very male dominated, and were everything I didn't want to be. I wanted a mentor. I wanted somebody to show me the ropes. I wanted all of these things. I remember instances where they don't stick up for you and the customer was always right no matter what. And so I started to feel this you were always expendable kind of feeling, and this boys club, which I couldn't stand, especially being such a competitive female. And when I opened my own business, all I knew was I wanted to be the boss that I wish I had.
Yeah.
So it kind of started with that. And I think I'm very results driven. So once I got a little taste of what can happen when you lean into team and leadership, that just catapulted it. And an extension of that is really how I started in business mentoring. Like, I found this huge satisfaction and fulfillment in helping people. And that kind of leads into meditation, which is about, acts of service and things like that as well. And so I think now knowing that that actually really fills my cup, then that drives it even more. So it's not just about success. If I do this is successful, like one of my versions of success is actually fulfillment. I actually get really fulfilled seeing other women that I employ, reach their heights and being able to help them do things. And so it's like the person who likes to give the birthday presents but doesn't really like getting them back, right?
Thank you for sharing like your definition of success. So it's around fulfillment, which is really interesting because oftentimes people will, define success monetarily or, sort of getting like how far you get in your career and titles and or being able to own a house and a car and go on, however many holidays a year. And so I really like what you're saying of like anchoring success in again, I just keep coming back to core values and what, fulfillment and helping other people succeed and like that act of service that really comes through in your definition of success.
I actually, if I can expand on that, my definition of success is that there's three buckets that must, and it's three circles, if you would, if I was to draw it, and it's the cross of all those three circles where they intersect. And those three circles for me that define success is money, fulfillment, and meaning. So I have to be doing meaningful work. It has to be fulfilling, and I have to obviously be making money. And it's those three things equally that I find successful. And often when I talk to people, they might have a lot of money and they might be doing really good work, but they've got no fulfillment. Or maybe they're, especially for a lot of female solopreneurs, they're doing really good work and they're fulfilled because they're helping people, but they're not charging what they're worth, so they've got no money. So I usually find when you talk to people that are feeling something, it is they're missing one of those three buckets.
Mm. And how did you go about defining fulfillment and meaning? As I absolutely agree with you. I love that model.
Yeah. So fulfillment for me is doing something that I'm proud to do. It fills my cup. So it's, helping people, acts of service. It's what uplifts me and gets me out of bed every day. That's really what fulfillment is for me. Meaningful work is doing work that matters, doing projects that matter, not mundane, things like that.
And would you say that, would that be your advice for anybody that's starting a business? Is that the place that you go to
Mm,
at the beginning of every conversation around if you're going to build a business, be really clear on these three components and
definitely.
then yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
100%. So define exactly how much money do you need to make? You need to define those three things to start off with, but then also make sure they align. Because you can't say to me, oh, I'm going to make $1 million in my first year and not have any employees, but then I'm also going to have fulfillment and only work 50 hours a week.
yeah, yeah.
Make sure that your goals in those three are aligned.
Yeah, and that's what I was actually going to say to you. Like, I love that model and understanding that that will evolve as the business evolves as well. Exactly to your point, if you want to have $1 million business, you likely have to compromise a little bit on this concept of work-life balance. Obviously, I naturally go towards fulfillment and meaning because it aligns with, I guess, who I am. But I'm really interested in the financial component because I do think it's oftentimes something that we overlook. What would your advice be around setting those financial targets?
What I find really interesting in is my experience is that obviously there's exceptions to this rule, but generally women have trouble defining what financial success they want, and men have trouble defining what fulfillment they want. So you saying that, that bit is harder. Some women, you're 100% right. I work with women and they just skip right past that. That's really uncomfortable for them. So we all have our vices, but I find that women themselves, it is challenging to talk about money. And it was very challenging for me in the early days. It took me quite a while to get comfortable to because we're not good at it. I wasn't an accountant. I didn't know what to do. It took me quite a while to really understand. And to be honest, it wasn't until my third year in business when I ran into an absolutely massive tax problem that I was like, I need to pull my head out of the sand and I need to learn about this so that I can stop making decisions on gut instinct. And so I started to educate myself about money. And that's when I understood that we should be able to, as business owners, and also especially female business owners, talk more openly about money. It's not a dirty subject, where it really feels like for a lot of women, it's a bit of a taboo subject.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so how did you go about navigating that for yourself?
Education. The more I learned, the more I became empowered to make financial decisions. I also learnt that if I wasn't charging my true worth, that subconsciously I was probably resentful somewhat to that client. So, for an example, the clients who would ask for a discount were generally the ones that then would use more time than anybody else. And you would start to resent them. And then are you really doing your best job for them? Because you've got that subconscious resentment and you're rushing through something because you know you've done it discounted. And so you're not doing work that is really fulfilling for you or meaningful for you because you knew you didn't charge what you should have charged. So it's well and good for me to say that now with 15 years under my belt, but it wasn't that way at the start. At the start, I pretty much did a cold call for a few other business work that they were charging, and then I charged the same to start off with. I'm pretty sure that's even illegal now in Australia. So, it took a while to have enough confidence to charge my worth and to test the boundaries a lot on what my worth is. And one of the biggest things that changed my mindset is I love the play on words. You know how people, there's that kind of saying that's, what is it? Money is the root of all evil. I love changing that and saying money is the root of all influence. And if you want to influence in your life, you have to have money. I'm not talking about being mega rich. I'm talking about you can't do anything. There is no non-profit out there that doesn't make money. They have to have money to have influence. And with whatever we've decided in our fulfillment successful bucket is important to us, we need money to do that, whether it be money so that you're eating properly, whether it be money so that you've got enough money to take the family on a holiday once a year, whether, whatever it is, we need money to do our best job to have influence. Because I found for me, one of the biggest stresses when money's tight, I really stress out. And I think that's often for most people.
Yeah, I agree. And the link, what you said about the value of like your self-worth, that's what money equates to, is so powerful to me because I agree. Like that's exactly where the the difficulty is, and I think particularly for women and how we have traditionally been conditioned, it's a self-worth and it's a value. And I don't know about you, but there's, you know, demanding more for yourself in every aspect of your life, I think is where this particularly plays out, as you say. And it makes me laugh because even just at the beginning of, charging what your competitors do, I did exactly the same. John down the road charges this, so I must be the same as John, totally discounting any other value that I bring to the table that's different. So um that made me chuckle, and I agree with you. I think it's a self-worth and a confidence um play as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And it comes back to the energy. If people are paying me to do a good job at what I'm worth, I'm going to pour into that and I'm going to show up as the best version of myself for that. And I'm going to do a good job and it's going to be fulfilling, it's going to be meaningful, and I'm going to make money. And also, then because I haven't discounted, I don't need to find two other clients to fill in the gaps of the money. And that just takes more time and I'm only making the same amount of money.
That's so true, actually. Again, like when you pull it back to energy, if you ask for what you're worth, then it means that, as you say, you can pour more into that project because you don't need. Yeah, I really like that actually. I hadn't thought. And then, as you say, if you go back to that model, that's what makes it all balance, isn't it?
I think one thing, and I assume it's similar to where you are, but there's no doubt the client expectations have changed a little bit in Australia over the last year, just with the cost of living. So money's harder. It's harder to spend. It's harder to let go of. It's harder to make. And so for me, rather than discounting prices, I would do things to add more value. So I was focusing on value rather than price, focusing on making sure people were understanding that we're getting value for money. Because in a world where people right now are really feeling this cost of living and they're weighing up, can I afford that or can I not? For them, it's about value for money. And so maybe I would do an extra little thing here, or I'd put something else in there, or I'd, give them an extra phone call or something else. But I wouldn't be discounting my price. I would be adding more value. It's very hard to put your prices down and then put them back up again, but it's a lot easier than if you've got a bit more time and you need to get something across the line, add a little bit more value somewhere.
Yeah. And I feel like what's coming out that even as you're talking about that, it's the value of relationship, isn't it? Like that's the key in all of this, isn't it? It's sort of being really aware of what you're bringing to every relationship in your life.
We have a saying in this office, it's relationships over transactions. Years and years and years ago, I actually had a bit of a rule in the office. It's changed now because we're all digital, but when someone rang up and wanted a quote, you had to turn your monitor off while you were talking to them so you weren't distracted by anything else that was going on any emails, and you were completely present with that client. And that makes a huge difference. Just the ability to be present, completely present with someone, that's value.
The key to success in life in general is, for me, relationships and bringing presence to those relationships. And exactly what you're saying, when you're in when you're in company with somebody who gives you their full attention and is fully present and is listening, already that engenders, for me anyway, this level of trust, because I'm like, okay, point one, they can give me 5 minutes and listen deeply and just hold a space for me. And that means, for me, I can start to trust them. And then once I feel I can start to trust somebody, then I feel I can start to open up to them, rely on them, become more vulnerable. And then that, I think, starts to build the foundations of really strong, authentic relationships in every aspect of your life. And I really appreciate what you're saying, because that's the tension, isn't it? When you run a business, to think of productivity as like output, and you have to be doing all the time and creating, but actually being is more I think more valuable to a business than doing sometimes. Like just that ability to know when to switch it on and off is huge.
And it took me a while to understand that the most important role I have, whether it be in a client meeting or a team meeting or individual meeting or with a business that I mentor, my number one goal is to be entirely present in that meeting with nothing else going on. The opposite of building trust is talking. It's all about you instead of about them. You make the meeting about them and being entirely present. That is actually what builds the trust as well. So you're 100% right.
And so alongside, building the business that you have been, for the past 15 years, and putting all of that energy and that focus and that passion and meaning into your business, how have you maintained that in your personal life as well?
I learned the hard way. Like what I'm talking about now, I'm sure some people go, oh, that's great in writing. But I I went through a first marriage. I had to get a stomach operation. I take anxiety medication. I was so burnt out. I was sleeping at the office because hard work actually gets results. And when you're results driven, in the first couple of years, I wouldn't care less if I worked till midnight and then slept at the office and then kept going, because it's getting all of these results, right? That's cool for a couple of years. Then that's it. And that was really when I was like, something has to change. I don't think I liked the personal version of myself that I was, and that I wasn't an identity away from the business. You know, the marriage had gone, the health was gone. I wasn't riding bikes. I was putting on weight. I didn't really have a circle outside that success. And that's when I started to learn all of these other things. Like, you need to have, I hate the word balance, and we'll probably talk about that, but you need to have ability to lean in and lean out. And that you can't be really successful in business and have a horrible personal life, because it does affect your business without you even knowing.
Yeah.
The happier you are at home, the happier you are in business. And so it has taken me a while it took me a while to get that right. It probably took me 5, 6, 7 years to get that right. But I also feel like you need to make every mistake in the world to understand how far you can push yourself, what's okay to do, and how much energy you can pour into. You need to push all those boundaries to understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So, you know, I was a solopreneur for a while there, and so I wore all the hats, and I didn't necessarily wear them all very well. And so now I choose which hats that I wear, and I wear them well, and I do those roles well, and I employ other people to do the ones that I'm rubbish at.
Yeah.
And that then really helps me with that on the personal side as well.
Yeah. Because as you're saying, like there's no concept of self-made. I think it's just such a fallacy. Like no one is self-made because there's always a network around you that helps support you in that success, whether it's immediate or, just the barista at your coffee shop that smiles at you every day that gives you that little bump, to sort of go in. Like is so exactly what you're saying. If you're so invested in the business and not in the support system in your life around you and your hobbies and your relationships and that build you up or that sort of help support you and keep you going along the way, um that's when things start to unravel and unfold, isn't it? And so and I also agree with you. I think there is sometimes as well this, it's like finding your edge, isn't it? And I think that's what we have to do in life and with high performance is, what is your edge? And you only sometimes know that, well, not sometimes, you only know that through trial and error and through actually action and doing, and knowing when you've fallen off and you've hit the you've hit the ground and you're like, oh, okay, that was probably a bit too far.
And
And
I
so,
like to call it like having people on your bus. That's the terminology I like to use. So have the best support network on your bus. So have the best accountant, have the best financial advisor. Like, yes, I know a fair bit in that, but I'm no expert. Have them in there. Have the best mentor. I still have a mentor. Have whatever you need on the bus to have what you need to be the best version of yourself. Don't expect yourself, because as a solopreneur, when we start out, we have to do everything. And I am yet to meet a person who started their first business because they were good at business. Every time I ask a room of people, why did you open your business? Oh, I wanted flexibility. I wanted to do it better. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to service clients differently. It's never because I'm really good at opening a business. And then we open a business and we're like, hold on, there's a lot more to this than actually doing what I do. And so when you get to a stage and you can fill your bus with people that can do the things that you're not really good at, and let that go.
yeah, absolutely. And then it's also from a personal perspective, fill your bus with people that build you up and that affirm you and that you enjoy spending time with. Because both are equally important, aren't they? Um,
Yes.
and so how did you, so from a, you know, when you found yourself with the energy was off and you weren't taking care of your well-being and wellness from a personal perspective, like what changes did you make and how has that evolved over the past few years for you?
I think personal development is very important to me. I give myself a very large budget each year for personal and professional development, um, whether that be meditation retreats. I'm going to New Zealand in a couple of months for a week-long meditation retreat. Whatever that may be, getting a mentor I have found was game changer. Sometimes I've had different mentors for different reasons, but for me, my mentor is not strictly business. There's no topic that's off the table. And that, especially for small business owners, it can be very lonely, and that's your whiteboard, your sounding board to really help you, someone that has walked that path before you, and really gives you that confidence. And so also education for me, confidence comes from competence. And so the more I learn about things, the more I feel confident. As soon as I've no longer curious, it's time for me to get out of business.
Mm, yeah,
Everything you have to be curious about. How could we do this better? Why did that person react that way? How could I help that person more? Why is that person upset when I delivered that information in that way? Why did they not react? Everything is an opportunity to be curious and test it and try it, and don't be afraid to, you know, and when you start living by that, you start bringing in this psychological safe environment into your workplace where your staff know that it's okay to make mistakes themselves, because their boss is making mistakes, but they're not mistakes because it just tests. I'm just testing something out. If it doesn't work, cool, let's go this way.
yeah. I heard there's something that I got told years ago that fail stands for first attempt in learning.
Oh, I love that.
I really liked it as well. I was like, wow, okay.
That's a good one. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, yeah.
Another one I love is failing forward. I always like to say, like, my mentor talks about this in one of his books, Peter Cook, is that if you're not failing 50% of the time in business, you're actually just not trying hard enough.
It's that confidence and that willingness to be seen and to ask questions. Like I think, it's it's so interesting because I was having a conversation at the weekend and the advice I got was never always be the person to ask the stupid question in the meeting. Like don't be afraid, because it's likely not stupid. It's likely the question that everybody wants to ask. And I feel like that's a lot of what you're saying is go into this world with linked to this curiosity. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to not know, because because that's actually how you're going to grow, and that's how you're going to achieve the fulfillment and the meaning and the money, which is how you're going to achieve the success, is what I'm hearing. I'm just really intrigued, and I ask all of my guests this question, and I'm intrigued with what your answer is going to be. But what is something that other people value that you don't?
Oh, I'm going to say it and then let me explain it, because when I say it, you'll be like, oh, work life balance. I don't value work life balance, but let me explain why. We spoke a lot about energy. For me, work life balance is living a mediocre life, because I want to do really important projects and then I want to lean all the way out and look after myself. And to do that, there is no ratio of balance. And it's not unusual for me to go, right, 3 weeks, I'm going all in. I'm going to do 70-hour weeks this. And then I go to New Zealand for a meditation retreat and don't talk to anyone for 10 days. That actually is not traditional work life balance. And I actually think that if I worked a 40-hour week every single week, instead of having this lean out and this lean in to work, then lean back out and lean back into your self care, this awareness of knowing when to lean where, that's actually what makes me do really good work. And that's what actually makes me really successful. So I actually think work life balance is complete BS. And I think it's more about having awareness, knowing when to lean into work, when to lean into yourself, whether it be self care, family, what have you.
But I think it comes back though, and I've always said this, it's around defining it for yourself. So actually your definition of it could be work-life balance because that's your definition and that works for you. So that allows you to feel actually in another way, it allows you to feel balanced in your life because as you say, that lean in, that lean out way of being makes you feel fulfilled and you are balanced in that way, otherwise you'd make different decisions. Whereas for some people work life balance is that traditional work from 9 to 5, switch off, go home. So I think again it's like it's how we started with your definition of success as well. I think we have these concepts, these arbitrary concepts and these definitions of things that we're meant to aspire towards, and it fuels this, we should do this, it must look like this, it has to. And the beauty of, the choice that we have is to define that for ourselves, and it will look different depending on different stages of our life. So I agree with you in a sense that, this binary concept of work-life balance, it's antiquated and it looks different for everyone, and there is no one size fits all.
Yeah, the ratio of work or life and how that looks has to be different for everyone, and it has to be very specific to you. And it has to benefit how you're going to do your best work, your most fulfilling work, your most profitable work, your most meaningful work. For some people, that might be work 2 days a week. Some people, it might be work 70-hour weeks, and then they do this, that, and the other.
We are at our time. That's it. We're done.
Amazing.
Thank you so, so much for an amazing conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really grateful to you for giving me your time at the end of your busy first day back. So, Peter, thank you so much.
No, it was my pleasure. I really enjoy interesting conversations, and I find people fascinating, and this conversation filled my cup, so thank you for the invite.
Thank you for being part of another great conversation. Your thoughts and feedback really mean the world to me, so please let me know what stood out to you or what topics you'd like us to explore next. Your feedback and input really helps us grow, so please don't hesitate to leave a comment or reach out. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with someone who might benefit, and subscribe to our channel. It honestly makes a huge difference. Not only does it help us reach more people, but it also helps us grow this incredible community. I want to send a heartfelt thank you to my editor, Stian Ritz, for making every episode sound amazing. And also to Jamie Jenkin for the beautiful music you hear each week. As always, I'm sending you so much love. Bye for now.